Welcome to the epicenter of sports and entertainment. This is the Rude Dog Show. Now, here's your host, Rudy Reyes.
Hey, welcome to the Rude Dog Show. This is Rudy Reyes. Hey, I am live. I'm here on StreamYard talking about the NBA. We're going to segue at that in the moment, at least momentarily speaking. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. Like it, love it, share it. I live for those things. I live for those components. They're always so much fun and so dynamic. And I love your input and thought process. And of course, we are live, as you can see on the lower left-hand part of your screen. Tonight is kind of a hodgepodge here. Only reason why is now the NFL is kind of segueing out. Now the Super Bowl will be in Las Vegas next week or so, and now here we are with the NBA on the horizon. Major League Baseball hasn't reported yet. There have been some moves, some transactions, but we'll talk about that at a later show. However, I wanted to bring in Mr. Barry Long, the second, not the first, not the third, the second, joins me here on the Rude Dog Show. Barry, hey man, thanks for joining. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rudy, for having me. I appreciate you. It was a great weekend in sports, and I just thoroughly enjoyed what we saw this weekend from football and from basketball.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I was at the SiriusXM studios, and I had a chance to pull a doubleheader with NHL hockey. So that was quite interesting as well. My first time operating a board that had to do with NHL hockey. So that was quite interesting for me. And the doubleheader was just a solid segue into the next game, which is kind of what we're going to talk about here tonight. The NBA is in full swing. We know that. It's almost a halfway of the season in the NBA, National Basketball Association. For those that don't know what the NBA means, and if you don't, maybe go write it down on a piece of paper. Maybe get a tattoo. Just make sure it doesn't say regrets on it. Speaking of lack of regrets, that game the other night against the Golden State Warriors, of course, Lakers are playing tonight against the Houston Rockets. Rockets are 21-24. Lakers are 24-23. They find themselves in the 9th position in the Western Conference, which is a great position that they would want to be in. Of course, fans would obviously think the very same thing, but it was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. It was a great game, though. Brutal ending for Steph Curry. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but I wanted to go over kind of what the game was in totality. And it was a claw, scratch, bite at the kneecaps, ankle breaking. I mean, there were so many things going on in that game. It was absolutely crazy. LeBron James burying in the season collectively almost 2,400 three-pointers in his career. And of course, he's played 42 games this season. He's made 91 points from three, 23-24 season. But then Steph Curry on the other side of that coin, 3,577 three-pointers in his career. And what's interesting, Steph Curry was asked during a post-game presser that night, just the other night, as to what it meant to lose that game at home. And of course, back-to-back games can never be good now that the Golden State Warriors find themselves 5 games back out of any type of positioning. Now, don't forget, this record belongs to Los Angeles as they've won 7 out of their last 10 against Golden State. And of course, you would expect the kind of teams that I'm looking at right now that are a little bit scarier than I thought they would be, at least at this point during the season, are the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Timberwolves. I mean, they're the Clippers, the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Kings, or I should say the other LA team. I don't know. I guess until they get out of renting part of Crypto.com Arena, they're going to be the rentees. Barry, when you look at this game, I don't know if you got a chance to watch the recap or what your thoughts were about the game, but what did Stephen Curry basically mean to you after he ripped his jersey from his mid-neck down? What were your thoughts about that?
I mean, just a brutal, tough loss for them. But, you know, Curry is a guy that has been demonstrative in the past. I mean, he's gotten in trouble for throwing his mouthpiece. He's gotten in trouble for, you know, he's been considered cocky for his little shuffle that he does. So, I mean, there's things that he does that aren't always in line with being the face of the NBA or one of the faces of the NBA, but it's okay. I mean, it's you have to understand that it's the battle, it's the grind of the sport, and it's just what comes along with the sport. I mean, and that game was just one of the classic games that we have seen this season. This probably been the most competitive NBA game that we've seen this season. It had a playoff feel. It almost was kind of as close to feeling like when we watched the in-game season tournament. But I mean, you look at LeBron James and what he was able to do down the stretch, and just being able to knock down those free throws, right? Those last free throws, because I thought the game was over when Steph Curry hits that three and there's 4.7 seconds left in the second overtime. But what LeBron does is he attacks the basket, which is what he should be doing at all times, is attacking the basket. He attacks the basket, goes full force, puts his head down, goes to the rim, gets fouled. And he has been criticized in the past for missing these free throws. I believe his free throw percentage shrinks. It goes down to below 75% when the game is on the line or a game-changing, game-clutch situation. So this guy he knocked down both free throws with ice veins in his water, ice water in his veins, I should say. And it looked really good, man. It looked really good down the stretch. And this is not the first time he's done that this season. This man has knocked down key shots in key moments of the game, key free throws, and to be doing all this in year 21 is just fantastic, Rudy.
Yeah, you know what? You're right, Barry. 38 years of age, or I should say 38 years young for LeBron James. He could probably do this till he's 40 at least. Why? Because Bronny is on the horizon. And if I know the way that LA works, and I'm an LA native, so I get it. I understand it more so for the Lakers than I do for the renters of Crypto.com Arena. They're going to go ahead and select Bronny James. Wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't shock me whatsoever, because LeBron James has a loud voice in that locker room. He has a loud voice in the NBA. He's a very stifling figure within the NBA landscape. And if the Lakers do that, he'll be able to play with his son at a ripe 39 years of age, at least at that point, if they do, in fact, draft Bronny James. Now, to talk about that game, it was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. I was on the edge listening, and it just had me on the cringe, thinking to myself, is this going to go to another overtime? And sure enough, it did. But when LeBron James struck from the charity stripe with 1.2 seconds on the clock, it was absolutely nuts. But then the ensuing pass in, Steph Curry decided to throw a Hail Mary into the iron, which did not go through. It fell at least a foot or so short. D'Angelo Russell came over and shanked it. A little squib kick on the left part of his left foot. Kicked it 2 rows into the stand. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, is this going to be a fine? And sure enough, it was a fine. Not maybe $15,000 that the NBA is finding D'Angelo Russell, maybe $5,000. Had he have kicked it right off his toe, Barry, it would have been $15,000, and maybe there's an upright somewhere. Maybe somebody's holding up their arms, thinking maybe if the ball goes through, it would be a good kick through the uprights. But, $15,000 is a little hefty for that, especially when you're not at home. Now, if you're at home, you may not get penalized for that. I don't know. I'm not Adam Silver. I can't make that call. But it wasn't even a full-blown punt. I would have had a lot more respect and understood the $15,000 mark. What are your thoughts about that kick off to the left shank of his left leg?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that it was something that you don't do in the basketball games. I mean, basketball games, there's unwritten rules, and then there's actual rules that are written down. And I'm pretty sure this is one of the unwritten rules that should be written down. But I mean, you don't kick the ball into the stands, whether you're celebrating a victory or you're upset and you have the agony of defeat going on there. Like, you just don't do it. It's just like when you don't score the ball, like when you're up by 10 or you're down by 10, and it's seconds left. You don't score that easy layup, because then you're messing up somebody's parlay, right? But at the same time, you said what?
I said it could be.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, $15,000 is a little bit hefty. I would have just said $5,000 maybe. I mean, $5,000 is a lot. That's an expensive ass kick, man. That is. That's crazy.
But in the stands, how can you not see a big orange ball headed your direction unless you're not paying attention to the game? Then in that case, maybe you're looking for a Taylor Swift sighting. I don't know. In either case, look. if you're an NFL kicker, you're not happy with that kick, and you're probably in your head thinking, yeah, he deserves that $15,000 fine because he didn't kick it the way he should have. So maybe D'Angelo Russell in the offseason will get some type of, I don't know, maybe he'll have a chance to play the NFL Fantasy Kick League where all you are is an actual kicker to go to the uprights, but then again, you're not Rob Gronkowski.
Yeah.
So it was kind of going back to the game and looking at it from a different perspective. The Lakers basically won it in overtime, a double overtime by 1 point. It had all the nuances of an instant classic, instant classic. There hasn't been a game like this in quite some time. When you look at field goals, I mean, it was almost dead even, but the difference was the field goal percentages were very different. You look at the free throws, 30 for 43. The Warriors barely got to the line. Of course, they were crying for fouls at least at some point, or maybe hoping the ref would actually call one in. And then rebounds, there were 5 more. Defensive rebounds, there were like 7 more. So, I mean, there's some disparaging points, but the points in the paint really stand out to me because once you're inside of that 3-point area, that's a point in the paint. I mean, you have to dig to get to that point. Look, they were probably asking the Warriors and Lakers where their double ARP cards are after that game ended because it was, again, an instant classic. I was waiting for someone to bring out a stroller or maybe a stretcher for some of these guys because they just looked absolutely exhausted, just exhausted.
They did, and they've been doing this for a long time, bro. I mean, think about that finals between the Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers when LeBron goes to Oracle and beats them. That's 2016. That's 8 years ago, and they were already mad years deep in by then. So I was watching that game like, man, I just wish we could clone Steph Curry and LeBron James, and we could have this rivalry for the rest of our lives because it is amazing to see what these guys do, and they bring out the best in each other. And it is just, I mean, it was an instant classic, like you said. And I think it's going to propel both teams to be better on in the second half of the season. And I'm excited for that. But real quick, we got a comment from a guy named Different on X, on formerly known as Twitter.
Definitely different. I can see that. Lakers about to go crazy. And they are. Why? Why? Because they are heading into the All-Star break 9th position. The Lakers have been here, done that before. It's not like this is their first time being down and not being number one, or not even in the top 5 within the last 3 to 5 seasons. So this is a very scary situation because you have teams that are always nipping at your heels. They always want a piece of you, and it goes on every single night, and it's a battle. And you're right, Barry. It had a playoff feel unlike any other game so far this season. And now that All-Star is upon us, in Indianapolis, man, it's going to be fun. It's going to be cool. One day I'll get a chance to go there, not as a fan, obviously, but as a reporter. So good job to the Lakers. One thing that Steph Curry did say, there's a certain kind of energy surrounding what we're trying to do. The good news is that if we keep doing that, you would like to think you can build momentum. Now, that's an interesting word. You would like to think. So it sounds kind of like the glass is half empty versus half full. What do you pick up from that?
I feel like the Warriors they needed that game more so than the Lakers needed that game. If you look at the standings, the Warriors are in 12th position right now, but the Lakers are right there. Okay, they're 3 games out of the 5th position, but they're also 3 games out of the 12th position. So it's like it is very, 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 very close right now as far as, and this is what happens. But you look at both of these teams and you say, okay, well, the Lakers, I feel like the Lakers are primed to more so to snap right now and to go off like Different said from X, because at the end of the day, this is a kind of proven point that LeBron James can get it done when it matters the most. Anthony Davis can step up as long as he's healthy, and they're getting a contribution from all these players on the bench. And I really think that this is gonna be better for the Lakers, and the Warriors. I mean, at 19 and 24, they're still right there as well. So I think both of these teams end up making the playoffs. I just believe that the Lakers have a higher seed than the Warriors.
Well, that's going to be interesting. This is more about a sprint and not a race. The NBA season is very long. You play over 100 games plus. And it's anybody's game. I mean, it's still anybody. It's almost like Cat's game right now, right? Of course, everybody remembers that one. I just think this is a very interesting and honest take from Steph Curry. I just don't. Clearly, when you lose, you don't have the physical energy to say, you know what, we're going to bounce back from this, or we're going to get it done in the next game. And it was his body language.
I think he's just being realistic. I mean, they're old too. I mean, look at what Clay. Look at how. I mean, Clay's probably he struggled this season more so than any other season, especially in the early on in the season. And he was getting put on the bench, and they were putting starters in over him and bringing him off the bench. And it's like when he comes in the game, he's a step slow. He's not the defensive wizard that he used to be in his prime, and he's not making it when he's not knocking down those shots and not getting open and not creating separation. Then it looks like a total different team, and not just a total different Clay, a total different team. And then when you have Draymond, who is a hothead, who could be suspended at any time, and if he does one more thing, if he breathes wrong at this point, he might get suspended. I mean, it just doesn't feel like a championship season.
if he picks the short straw, you never know, because his straw is always short.
Bro, he's on thin ice.
He's on probably the thinnest of ice. I think NHL players would be very happy to know that they play on thicker ice than the ice that Draymond Green is playing on right about now.
Good thing he lost weight, because that's some thin ice, brother.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? You can cut that with a knife, and a butter knife, no less. The other part of that conversation that he had with that one reporter is that is what our hope is, but it's a tough way to go back-to-back games at home when you play well enough to win, but you just don't get it done. And it's really interesting to know that Stephen Curry is a guy that you expect to get something more from on the court. Look, it's not as if he had a bad game. He had an absolutely stellar game, but there were little misses. We're talking about points in the paint. We're talking about not converting. They got a little bit tired. They got a little bit sloppy near the end. And that's where the Lakers capitalized, and LeBron James won it all with 1.2 seconds on the clock. So it doesn't really surprise me at this point that not only did the Lakers win, but it wasn't as if the Golden State Warriors let them win. They played their hearts out. Again, an instant classic. But one note here is that the Lakers have won 7 out of the last 10 games against Golden State. And the fact alone that Golden State is on the outside looking in, at least from right now, from this perspective right now within the Western Conference, says a lot. And I don't believe that even having the aforementioned Draymond back, that's going to be the catalyst, because it takes time to get reacclimated to a system that you otherwise have been extremely familiar with. Why? Because of the insert of new bodies. Pojenski's in there. Garrick is in there. I mean, you have a variety of guys, and they're trying different things. And I don't blame them. Why? Because you need 2 or 3 guys in lieu of not having Draymond Green. Now, of course, I'm not talking about him swinging around like he's Zangief in a video game, when he doesn't have any real special moves other than just swinging his arms around, flailing them, knocking nearly, everybody's head off in the way. But it's going to take time. It's going to take time for the Warriors to get back to this winning methodology, these winning ways. And I just don't know that they can actually do that right now. I don't know if they'll be able to do that throughout the entire rest of the season. I'm Rudy Reyes right here on the RudeDogShow.com, joined by Barry Law in the second here. Before we switch gears a little bit, talk about the NFL, because everybody's talking about the NFL, and why not? The NFL is still king, and of course it will be on Super Bowl Sunday. But to wrap up the NBA for just half a minute, there are some teams I'm kind of scared of right now. I mean, if you're looking at the Western Conference in general, Thunder, as I mentioned earlier, 32-14, Timberwolves 32, also with the same record, Clippers 30-14, Nuggets 32-15, Kings 26-18, Suns 26-20, Pelicans with the same record, Mavericks, Lakers, Jazz. That rounds out your top 10. There are teams that really scare me right now. Of course, you could never count out the Denver Nuggets, only because they are the repeat, they are the current champions, and they're trying to repeat. That's one of the hardest things in the NBA to do, is to repeat.
Yeah. And those Clippers, though, those Clippers are the hottest team in the NBA right now. And what they did to Boston the other night, oh my gosh. I mean, This team is all about health, and that's the team that scares me the most. Like the Thunder and the Timberwolves are young teams to me, and yeah, they are. They've been performing at a high level all season long, and they don't look like they're gonna let up. I mean, they've each have a superstar who has ascended past the All-Star level, and now it's become superstars, and that's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for the Thunder, and that's Ant-Man for the Timberwolves. But even with that being said, I still think that the Clippers, with those guys that they have, Kawhi Leonard, who's a proven champion, James Harden, who can get it done. He just hasn't gotten it done in the playoffs in his career. And with Paul George, I think that that and the surrounding cast, the coaching, I just think that the Clippers are the team that scares me the most.
Yeah, no, the Clippers are right there. Now, don't forget they are building the Intuit Dome. So if you're there, you're going to be into it, and you're going to vacate Crypto.com Arena on a very fast level. So with that being said, again, it's a very scary time of year. This isn't Halloween, but it's kind of scary, like Halloween would be, especially growing up when I was a kid, anyway. But look, the Thunder, Timberwolves, Clippers, Nuggets, Kings, all dangerous teams. But I will not count out the Lakers, at least not yet. I'm more on what they can do to keep the momentum, how they keep climbing. Them and Dallas just went back and forth. Doncic and LeBron and Doncic. I mean, it was an absolute. They cloned one another in games to the effect where they're almost playing like one another on opposite ends. Same kick out, on a step back jumper, or 3-point, a shot, trying to drain it in, whatever you want to call it. Very similar play styles, and they both complement each other very well, especially watching them play on the floor at the same time. The problem I have with Doncic is that he's just a big crybaby in certain components at certain times during the game. And, of course, more of an upset now that he scored over 70 points, which hadn't been done But
he learned that from LeBron, though. He did learn that from LeBron, because LeBron has been one of the biggest crybabies in the history of the league, too, as much as I love him.
Yeah. No, there's certainly some fake tears to shed in the NBA. Speaking of fake tears, there are some real tears going on down Lions' faces right about now. I am sure fans, players, and Dan Campbell, basically, the Lions kind of wet the bed. I mean, they really did. It was Dan Campbell's overly aggressiveness, and yes, they didn't stop them on defense, but. And I've had this going, I've been back and forth. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not as if I was going against the 49ers. I was more about where the Lions are, where their mindset was, how they're going to enter this NFC Championship game they haven't been to in a very, very long time, since Steve Young was quarterback, which is a very long time ago. But Dan Campbell's overly aggressiveness decided to bite him in the kneecaps. And unfortunately, instead of playing in overtime, he decided to negate a 3-point field goal attempt, which would have stretched the lead by 3. The Niners would have went to 27. They would have went to 27 and played in overtime. And that's at that point in the red zone, you play aggressively. You play, as they say, to win the game. And Dan Campbell decided to allow his defense, which wasn't phased, which kind of allowed the Niners to creep up the field and basically win the game. I mean, and the 49ers are going on to face off against the Kansas City Chiefs, who have been there the last 4 out of 5 years in Las Vegas on Super Bowl Sunday, which is forthcoming. Interestingly enough, Dan Campbell clearly doesn't really have any regrets in regards to what he had done or the decisions that he had made prior to that. And I wanted to see the Lions go all the way. Why? Because they never have. And if you weren't a fan of this team, and where they were at 0-13, at 0-16, players are still on that roster that remember what it was like to go 0-13, 0-16. Are you kidding me? Barry, your thoughts on that game? Did you watch it from end to end?
Yes.
Thoughts about him not going through that field goal attempt, which would have stretched the lead and made the 49ers have to play catch up?
For me, there were 3 opportunities where he could have gone for it, and he went for it the last 2 opportunities, and that was in the second half. But when you look at that game, man, Dan Campbell is the reason why they lost this game. And I mean, it just is what it is. And I get it that he's being aggressive has helped them this season. and that's the reason why they wanted to keep being aggressive. But he kicked the field goal before the half. Okay, take the points, take the 3, and then you end up. You should kick the field goal when you're at your own 30-yard line. Okay, you tie the game theoretically. The second one that they didn't have, you tie the game, and he chose not to. And it was a 4th and 3, and it was just so brutal, so absolutely brutal to watch. And then that's the difference in the game is the 3 points. But what really stood out to me the most is that Detroit got comfortable. Look at right here where you see in the third quarter, 17-0. They got outscored 17-0. Okay. And that was the difference in the game is that the momentum shifted in that third quarter where this Lions team, they just for whatever reason, they took their foot off the gas. They weren't taking the shots downfield. They tried to rely on the running game and end up fumbling the ball. And the turnovers. And that's the difference in the Ravens game between the Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's also the difference in this game. But Dan Campbell, you have got to be better. You have got to kick the 3. You got to understand that you cannot. This ain't Madden, bro. This is not Madden. And this is not a week 12 game, week 13 game. This is the freaking this is the NFC Championship, which your team has never been to the Super Bowl. And think about those fans. I saw a story. There was like a lady that was like 102 who's been a Detroit Lions fan her whole entire life. There was a man that was 104, been a Detroit Lions fan his entire life. And the stage was set for them to go in, and not only go in, to go up against the Kansas City Chiefs team, because the AFC Championship had already been decided at that point. But the chance to go in against a Chiefs team that, yes, Mahomes is great, but this is a vulnerable team this season. There was a stretch where we thought that this team wouldn't even get this far. So the stage was set for the Detroit Lions, and I thought Dan Campbell, yes, being aggressive is what got you here, and you've been aggressive, so that's in your DNA. You want to bite off a kneecap, but you've got to coach these games with a little bit more caution, especially when you lose by the margin in which you decided not to go for.
Yeah, that was a massive catalyst as to why the Lions lost. Look, I understand being aggressive during the regular season. Nothing wrong with that. Gamble. And when you gamble and you lose, that's the worst feeling in the world. When you gamble and win, that's the best feeling in the world. And it brings on a whole different sensory type of feelings and emotions and thoughts. And, where do we go from here? And how do we move on to the next game? Let's emotionally, tie ourselves to this moment. But after you blink your eyes, that emotional attachment's got to go. And that's when you focus on the next round. I think Dan Campbell may have gotten ahead of himself in some capacity. He owned some of the mistakes. He owned the team's mistakes, essentially. Why? Because he was overly aggressive. And look, I understand there were opportunities that Dan Campbell did not take the 3. Look, you have to take what the defense gives you. I hate to say it. It sounds like a broken record. Everybody's saying it. Everybody's talking about it. But that's the honest truth. If the defense is giving up field for you to move the chains, you take the opportunity to strike at any point whatsoever. 3 points, 6 points, it doesn't matter. This is not a regular season game. You can afford to lose a regular season game, and they lost quite a few of them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you take that gamble during an NFC Championship game you haven't been in since the 80s. The 80s. Heck, I was operating cassette players in the 80s, okay? CD players. People still had 8-tracks in their cars. I'm just saying Dan Campbell probably one of those guys that had 8-tracks in his car.
Oh, yeah, he did. He definitely did.
You keep the Lions on track. You take the points when the opportunity presents itself, and he did not. And I guarantee you he's kicking himself in his teeth right now, wondering, how can I do better next year? Because they're also booking flights to Cancun, just like the rest of the NFL, except for the Chiefs and the 49ers. Now, on to the other game, when you look at the Chiefs and the Ravens, basically that game was given up by Lamar Jackson. I mean, period. You don't throw interceptions in the end zone. You had a quarterback spy on him throughout a good part of that game, if not all that game. Why? Because Lamar Jackson is who he is. And if you play against his strengths, you can capitalize on it. And that's exactly what the Chiefs did. Now I'm not saying that the Chiefs allowed the Baltimore Ravens to, have this massive lead in the first half. But look, it was only 10 points. Nothing massive about that. But what is massive is the corrections that Andy Reid made heading into the second half. And look, this was not a blowout game. This was not 24-21. This wasn't 27-24. This was a low scoring 7-10 win. But the Kansas City Chiefs have been there, done that. So the recipe that Reed is cooking in the kitchen isn't being shared by anybody, because they've been here 4 out of the last 5 years in a Super Bowl and have won the last 2. They are the current defending superior team to the 49ers from a championship perspective, with rings on their fingers. Obviously, you're not going to throw a football with a ring on your finger, especially
Pat Mahomes could, though. I'm sure he could.
I'm sure he probably could too. I just wouldn't chance it, because now you're giving the ball and maybe the ring away if it slips off your finger. But this is a very interesting game. Looking at the 49ers, going back to the Lions game, that was just marvelous. Now, I haven't ever known Mike Shanahan to ever, Kyle.
Kyle, yeah.
Kyle usually isn't a comeback kind of coach. His inability to come back from a deficit hasn't been in his repertoire. And it really never has. And it made, well, obviously you can't say that now, because he decided to come back, and they came back in the third and came back in the fourth. Yeah. And that's really what it boils down to, is execution, getting the ball to your playmakers. Deebo Samuel was a full participant in the day or day and a half part of practice in the last 2 days leading up to the NFC Championship game. He was like, man, I'm ready to go, rock and roll. And guess what? He did. Chris McCaffrey walking into the end zone like he owned the place. Yep. And of course, how do you not? It's Santa Clara and it's 49ers. And, maybe he brought a shovel with him, going to dig for more gold. I don't know. But, the 49ers just found a way to get to pay dirt more often, more frequently, and basically outlasted and diced up the Lions secondary, which had been probably the biggest untalked about component as to why the 49ers would win versus why the 49ers would lose this game. The shoulders, the shoulder throws and the responsibility from Brock Purdy to take care of that ball, we've seen him scamper 2 times for over 20 yards. So he has the wheels. He just seen the opportunity and had taken it. And that's what makes a quarterback great, is recognizing what you need to do and to get it done. I'm not saying that the Detroit Lions screwed the pooch or they did anything overly uncharacteristic that really put them behind the 8 ball. But at the same token, Jared Goff was traded from Los Angeles, and in turn they acquired Matthew Stafford, who was a long tenured, and I guess he got tired of losing and decided to be with a winner, and Los Angeles Rams won that, just a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. But my point is this, is that the Ravens were winning this game on paper, but what they weren't doing is winning it in the secondary. The secondary had given up so many points. They had given up so many opportunities to the Kansas City Chiefs. You double cover Travis Kelce at all costs. They did not do that. And then you have Zay Flowers, who decided to get upset and be very immature on the sidelines, bang his helmet, and in turn hurt his hand, which hurt his ability to come back into the game. That just shows his lack of maturity. That shows his inability to understand the situation and to just answer the bell and be that guy. I'm not saying that he wasn't in that game, but you hurt your team when you go off and do very immature things. We'd seen that from quite a few wide receivers this past season. Steelers wide receiver also getting a little heated, getting upset, but not mature enough to handle the moment, to understand what he needed to do, but then made the correction in the second half of the season to be that guy, to come down and make it happen. And George Pickens certainly did just that for the Steelers. So we'll see what happens in year 2. However, so many good takeaways and lessons to learn if you're the Baltimore Ravens. Of course, I am not a Ravens fan. I'm very objective, as you can probably see. I am. I couldn't tell with your sunny California background. But the bottom line is this: Baltimore just needs to do different things. They need to run and operate the game very differently if they ever get back to this point. And it's not very frequently. Well, there's no guarantee that you're going to as well. So there's life and guarantees do not mix. And unfortunately, there's no guarantee that's going to happen. So look, the Super Bowl is going to be playing the way that I see this game unfolding between the Chiefs and the 49ers, it's probably going to be a shootout. And when I say a shootout, I'm saying that the 49ers will capitalize in the red zone. They're going to go to Kittle more than they did in the NFC Championship game. They're going to find Deebo Samuels in the slant. They're going to go to basically anybody and everybody who could hold on to the ball, including CMC out of the backfield. We didn't see a whole lot of that. We've seen some trickery on the Lions offense with some flea flickers. They had 2 in that game. One was good, one was not. However, 49ers will just capitalize and just keep moving the chains. I'm picking the 49ers to win their 6th Lombardi trophy. The Chiefs O-line, on the other hand, been playing absolutely stellar. I mean, stellar on that line. Patrick Mahomes has had all the time in the world, but we know what Patrick Mahomes does. There is no secret sauce to the field that he moves on. There is no solution to stopping Patrick Mahomes, and we've seen that play after play after play after play for at least 2 or 3 years, even when they didn't go to the Super Bowl and when the Chiefs only had 1 Super Bowl championship, and now they have, 3. So again, it goes to show that Patrick Mahomes is not only a generational player, but he makes things happen on the run. He still has a gunslinger mentality. Purdy does as well, but he's more of a pocket passer and or runner when he needs to, and he sees the opportunity. We've seen the NFC Championship game. Who do you see winning? Why? And what's the score?
Well, but before I give my Super Bowl pick, let me just, as a Ravens fan, let me woosah, okay? The Ravens had, I'm not going to sit here today and cry over spilled milk, cry over bad calls, because there were a couple missed calls that I felt like they went the Chiefs' way, but so many self-inflicted wounds by the Ravens. I mean, you mentioned it, the Zay Flowers. He had 3 rookie mistakes, okay? The first one was the taunting penalty after the big play, which takes him back 15 yards. He then makes up for that, right? Then the next play, he tries to dive in the end zone, doing too much, like the Derek Carr thing where you fumble right at the goal line, and then the other team recovers. It becomes a touchback instead of a touchdown, it's a touchback going the other way. It's so frustrating. And then the frustration moment when he slams his hand down and cuts his hand open, and that's ultimately the reason why Odell Beckham had to come in the game. Then you talk about all the penalties. You've got to double Kelsey. You cannot have Kelsey go off for 9 catches for 96 yards in the first half. I mean, it is ridiculous. They like the press coverage. Kyle Hamilton's been great all year in stopping the run and also in stopping the pass and covering the pass. But ultimately, he needed help yesterday. And he was giving him about 5 to 10 yards off the line of scrimmage to just do whatever he wanted. And they were pressing everyone else. It just didn't make sense. But the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, you talked about Brock Purdy was able to effectively run yesterday. I mean, I believe he had 9.6 yards per carry. So Brock Purdy went for 5 carries for 48 yards. Effective running in the situations that require it. Lamar Jackson stood in the pocket for way too long to have that skill set. I mean, I get it. You've been a pocket passer this entire season under Todd Monken. But yesterday was the time to where you got no separation from your receivers. You got to go, bro. You got to take that ball down and you got to run it. And it was just frustrating to watch. But the Chiefs are such a great team, and they are just waiting for you to make any kind of mistake, and they're going to capitalize on it. Andy Reid, Spags, Kelsey, Mahomes. I mean, this is championship DNA right there. So the way I see this game playing out, them knowing how to win in big games, the 49ers being still inexperienced as far as, in the quarterback position. And Kyle Shanahan has been to a Super Bowl. He's, as an offensive coordinator with Atlanta, obviously, in the Matt Ryan's MVP season. And then obviously a couple years ago, this is a rematch of that. I think that there's going to be a lot of, a narrative surrounding this game about the rematch from years ago, because it's the same head coach. You just have a different quarterback. Instead of Jimmy Garoppolo, it's Brock Purdy. But I don't know if, the whole 2 weeks leading up to the game, it's one thing that when you're there for the first time, you're starstruck, man. You're at media week and all this. I mean, they want to know every single thing about you when they ask you in interviews. I mean, you've got so much coverage, and you could get caught up in the glitz and glamour for your first time being at the Super Bowl. So I think Patrick Mahomes probably has a routine by now. He knows exactly, where he's gonna stay. He knows exactly what he's gonna do. He's got his schedule out. He's like, man, we're not going to this media event. We're going to this one. We're not doing this. We're not partying. And I feel like the possibility for the 49ers and the stage to be too big for them is because Christian McCaffrey hasn't been to a Super Bowl either. Yeah, so I like the Chiefs championship DNA, and that secondary stepped up all the way up yesterday. And I think that they continue this momentum and they ride this wave en route to Patrick Mahomes' third championship ring. And then I think the GOAT conversation, we start to have it.
It's going to be a mini GOAT type of situation.
Baby GOAT.
You have the Trenta GOAT, which is Tom Brady, and then you have the Venti GOAT. And the Venti GOAT is not Mahomes. The Venti GOAT goes to Joe Montana. Then you have the Grande GOAT. And the Grande GOAT would probably be Patrick Mahomes, at least at that point. And then you have your 2-ring winners, right? Your Eli Mannings, your Ben Roethlisberger, your Peyton Manning as well. So you have a hodgepodge of guys that are mixed in with that whole 2-ring conversation. However, there's just way too much to like about the Kansas City Chiefs, and I'm not talking about Taylor Swift. This is not Taylor Swift hour. You can swiftly turn the channel if you think that we're bashing Taylor Swift or
shout out to Taylor.
Even though she's making millions of dollars off of her own NFL license, authentic jerseys, she's decided to turn into sweaters. Just saying.
She's beautiful though, man. Look at that, man. But like when I looked up her net worth, she looks a lot better now. I can tell you that.
Of course you'd say that. Speaking of today, because she could be broke tomorrow. And of course, if they get married, who knows what could happen. But today in sports history.
Ooh.
Everybody loves sports history. This is for you guys. You guys have been asking for. We decided to do a little bit different of a segment here on the show. Look, the 1900 American League was organized in Buffalo, Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, Indianapolis, Kansas City, Milwaukee, and Minneapolis. And then you look at 1906, Dutch speed skater Koen de King skates a world record, 32,370 miles in 1 hour.
Good God.
That's insane.
That's insane, bro.
I can't even imagine. And then look at the jump. He's a better man than me. You can get.
And what year is that? 1906.
1906. Yes, everything was still black and white. Well, at least, yeah, it was black and white until the late 60s, early 70s. Don't even ask me how I know that. And then you move into the first player selected in 1936 to the Baseball Hall of Fame. That's Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, Honus Wagner, Christy Mathewson, and Walter Johnson. Wow. Those guys are not depicted here, but when you look at the Babe Ruth curse, it's real. Yes, it is. No one can deny that. Ty Cobb, an absolute beast in his own right with that crushed skull cap he's wearing. That's vintage. Absolute vintage. Nobody else on the planet in Major League Baseball, they want their crown upright, and that one is not.
That looks like a dad hat that's been sat on 18 times, bro. Like, God.
His dog probably sat on. He probably ran it over a couple times just to get exactly how he likes it. But shout out to those guys. And, of course, I have a final. Rockets beat the Lakers in the NBA. Boo. But it is what it is. When you're the Lakers, now you're down to probably the 10th position. That's another story for another show. And then the Australians, not Australian for beer, mate, but the Australians of the 1940s had a trifecta. In 40, the championship belonged to the men's tennis club, the women's tennis club in the same year. That's crazy. How do you do that? In the singles, as well as Adrian Quist beating Jack Crawford 6-3, 6-1, 6-2 for second Australian title. Not his first, his second, like you, Barry Long the second. Not the first.
I like that.
And then Wynn Bolton wins her second Australian single title, beating Thelma Coynes 5-7, 6-4, 6-0. And then in 46, they did it again. John Bromwich wins his second title, beating fellow Australians. So this is an Aussie match. This is like sticking two kangaroos in the same bin with an 8 cents and expecting different results. Denny Pale.
That's how kangaroos fight.
Well, that's
box.
what Bromwich was doing to Jenny Pales, but 5'7", 6'3", 7'5", 3'6", and 6'2". So that was the convincing final right there at 6. When you beat someone handily at 6'2", that means you were wearing the guy out, and that's exactly what you did in 46. Anyway, this is Rudy Reyes, joined by Barry Long, the second, not the first, not the third, on the Root Dog Show. It's not even legal for me to say I'm Rudy Reyes the second because it's not on my birth certificate.
Oh, wow.
But technically I am indirectly. So this, no. So anyway, with that being said, this is Rudy Reyes. Thank you for joining us this evening. We certainly appreciate it. Like it, love it, share it. Send this thing out into the metaverse, the universe, and whatever verse is left out there. But anyway, we appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys again real soon.
Thank you.